All right, looks like our clock says 9:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started this morning. Good morning to everybody, and thanks so much for joining us. Happy March, happy Thursday to you. We're excited to kick off Phase 5A in the Catawba Watershed Management Group Water Loss Program. This is a multi-phase project, and many of you have been involved in the phases to date. So very excited to work again on the next phase, and we'll talk a little bit today in our presentation about what's going to be involved in this phase, but also about how this phase ties to the rest of the phases, because this is really part of a big picture. And so it's very exciting to get going here. We are going to have an opportunity for Q&A, so if you have questions along the way, feel free to jot those down at your desk, or if you want to type them into the chat box. Drew Blackwell with our team is on station, and he can receive those questions, so we'll hit those. We'll also open up the phone lines. I think we have a small enough group we can manage the audio and have some Q&A open by the phone lines if that works best for us at the end of the presentation today. So with that, let's go ahead and dive right in. And by the way, this is being recorded, so if you want to watch it later or share it with your friends, this will be available by recording. Quick refresh. The water loss program that the Catawba Group has been working on is really looking to adopt and implement state-of-the-art practices for managing water loss within the water utility. And we call that the M36 method or methodology. And the reason for that is that is the manual reflected by the American Water Works Association that captures these practices all the way from conducting audits through doing the necessary analysis and then going out to intervene to try to reduce and optimize water loss within the system in a way that's cost effective. That manual is in its fourth generation as of 2016. First one actually came out in 1991. Back then it was actually called the Water Audits and Leak Detection Manual. So it has been some evolution in the methodology since then. So those are some of the practices that are key and central that we'll be talking a little bit about today. Another entity, the Water Research Foundation, has done quite a bit of work, definitely in the 2000s, but especially in the last 3 to 5 years, research into the notion of validation and validity and some of the things that can introduce error into our data systems that can then feed into the audit. So validation is a critical part of the overall M36 method. So we'll be talking about that as well. So you can see that this is an exciting time to be adopting and implementing water loss practices, or taking what you've been doing for quite some time and enhancing it and evolving it further. So this is really where we start from as we look at the big picture. So that big picture, in a nutshell, is, and when we kind of say the M36 methodology, it sort of goes through this arc, and this is a circular arc, if you will, kind of going through these things on an annual basis to determine water loss volumes through an annual water audit with what we call level 1 validation. And for those of you who've been active in this program so far, phases 1 through 4 really have sort of encapsulated the work on this first step in the M36 big picture to establish a baseline water audit with validation, understand our apparent and real loss volumes. From there, the big picture, though, goes through the process of developing loss profiles, which happens to be the focus of the current phase, the one that we're going to be talking about on the webcast today. From there, though, economic analysis is needed to determine ultimately the cost benefit. Water loss exerts a cost. It costs money to pursue it, and so the relationship between the benefit you gain back and what you invest is key. And when we go to implement interventions, we want to make sure we're cost effective. So all of these things relate and work together, and in sequence with a bit kind of the law of the harvest. We have to follow the logical sequence and be rational and methodical in order to be cost effective. So we'll come back to this big picture as we talk through things today, but know that phases 1 through 4 have essentially established this first step in the four major pieces of the big picture. Quickly looking at the results of those first step, phases 1 through 4. Take a quick peek here on a aggregate level across all of the 19 water audits that were part of the previous phase 4. Aggregated together, a total of about 15 billion gallons of non-revenue water for the baseline year, which was 2016. Aggregate cost across all the utilities in the group was around $16 million per year. And then we also assessed the validity of that number through two metrics. One is known as the validity score, data validity score. Out of a scale of 100, the weighted average across all the utilities is around a 63. You can see the ranges there from low to high, but the weighted average around 63. And what that tells us is that while there certainly are some incremental improvements that can be made in the data reliability, we've got good enough confidence in the results of this baseline to move ahead with looking at cost-effective intervention strategies. And so that's where we're moving ahead now in phase 5. Interestingly, the notion of water loss and more broadly non-revenue water, it's a recurring thing. It's happening all the time and each year. So this volume and this dollar amount, if we consider it on an ongoing basis, even just a 5-year horizon, you can see that $16 million of annual cost that's experienced across the Catawba group turns into a much bigger number because it is a cumulative number. So this helps sort of to lay the groundwork for, well, what if we just sort of kept going as we are now? What is the cost of doing nothing different from current practices? And you can see that it becomes a considerable and driving force. So implementing M36 method can help us in this example to look at the 2021 picture, can help us to get to an overall cost that's much less than that, and that's kind of our big goal. So a couple other things that were outcomes from phase 4. I think it'll be helpful to look at this for setting the stage for phase 5, which is the one that we're moving ahead with now. You can see on a total basis for non-revenue water, the range, and for those of you not recently familiar with this type of graphic, it's a box plot. So the bars up and down show the extents of minimum to maximum, and then the middle points show the 25th and 75th percentile. So you got your median there with the middle line and the average with the X. So you can see that the range is from in the teens on 1,000 gallons per connection per year on a volume basis up to somewhere in the 50s. So pretty wide range there of volumetric indicator for total non-revenue water. And then the same deal on the cost. Cost exerts for each of the 19 utilities is pretty varied, and that's expected. For folks that are on let's say, just a few wells and production costs are relatively cheap, then leakage in those systems are much less expensive, much less costly. For example, a system that is buying water. You purchase your water. When you experience leakage, you're essentially experiencing that at that purchase rate. That's what it costs you. So there's expected to be a wide range. Why is this important? Well, as we move forward into phases 5 and 6 and getting to intervention, we need to make sure that we are tailoring the water loss interventions to that utility's specific situation. For some systems where volumes and costs are fairly low for leakage, then leakage intervention isn't going to be a high priority. It's the other items that need to be really prioritized and focused on. So that sets the stage. Here is just one final metric that sort of helps illustrate that point as well, is this one that's known as the leakage index. And the closer this index gets to 1, the closer a utility's leakage levels are sort of at that low limit, meaning there's not a whole lot of opportunity for further reductions. And you can see we've got a few systems that are down near that one index, and then all the way up to a few outliers that are actually in more of the 6 and 6.5 range. So case in point, for some of these utilities, leakage management is a high priority, and for some of these utilities, leakage management is a low priority. And so we want to make sure we're definitely considering the volumes and costs for each utility situation when we're looking at what types of interventions are going to be cost effective. That's absolutely the driver and the key in the M36 methodology, which gets us back to our big picture. Here we see phase 5A, and we actually have carved out 5A and 5B. I'll talk a little bit about the delineation between those two in a bit. But mainly the current phase we're in, we're calling it 5A, and the goal of this is to develop water loss profiles. We look specifically at the two major types of loss, real and apparent, and if you recall, real loss being physical leakage and apparent loss being those losses of revenue that can happen when your meters under register, water is stolen from you, or anything in the billing process results in underbilling a customer by mistake. So any of those things that are contributing, developing a more detailed profile of those is very critical, because we need to make sure we understand how each of those subcomponents are behaving, because each one requires a different strategy, and even in respect to leakage. And that's what we'll talk a bit more about today, is how those subcomponents behave and why the profiling of them is critical. Ultimately, we're going to get to the data that we'll be asking you to provide back to us to help provide that, or to help facilitate that loss profiling process. Just a quick bit of a deeper dive into the water loss profile itself. As you can see, you may hopefully recognize by now our water balance graphic, where we've got the two types of loss, apparent and real. Apparent comprised of theft, meter under registration, or billing system data handling errors. And real loss is comprised of three types of leakage. And the core focus for this water loss profiling will be on the leakage component. We will be looking at those apparent loss pieces, but the reason that the heavy focus is on the leakage piece is that most utilities aren't tracking a lot of data regarding the apparent loss pieces. You may be tracking some, and we're going to ask you to provide it to us if you have it, but in most cases there's not a lot of records, for example, on theft. You might have a few instances where it was discovered, but maybe not detailed records on the events themselves, estimations of volumes of theft, and those types of things. So typically the more rich data lives into the leakage side of things. So that's where we'll put emphasis, but we will be asking essentially for anything that you've got available in any of these categories to provide to us will be helpful. But if you don't have it, that's okay. I mean, that kind of goes, you may remember that happened in the previous phases of, if we ask you for something and you don't have it, or you don't have exactly what we're asking for, we'll work with you. Just kind of let us know, and that's definitely the tone and tenor of this process. So let's take a quick look at the types of leakage, and when we're speaking about a leakage profile or real loss profile, what do we mean by that? So here we see three main types of leakage that we experience in our water utilities. And I'll start from the right, because this is the one that you're typically used to interacting with. Reported leakage, those are the ones that come to the surface. They find you, is another way to think about it. These are the leaks that find you. You interact with them, they get the call either from the public or from the utility staff, and you proceed to fix them, usually in a fairly short amount of time. Then there's this middle category called unreported leakage. These are leaks that are running underground. They're not surfacing for any number of various reasons, but they are running at a size that is enough to generate enough sound that they are acoustically detectable. And so this is where traditional acoustic leak detection and acoustic leak equipment, microphones and correlators and the like, are useful in addressing those. Then we have this third category on the left called background leakage. And background leakage are much smaller leaks, but there's a whole lot more of them, and they tend to occur at the joints and the taps. We think of them as weeps and seeps, kind of the death by 1,000 cuts mentality, where there's just a lot of them across the system. They're all just very small, so they're not making enough noise to generate, or they're not generating enough noise to be heard by any type of acoustic equipment. So why would we be interested to break these three things down? Well, it all comes down to make sure that we're selecting the right tool for the job. And if you think about the top-down water audit, or that first step in the big picture, 4 steps of the big picture, we're developing a water balance. That water balance shows you one total volume of leakage. It's called real loss. It's just a total volume of leakage. It does not tell you how much is in each of these three categories. So that's what we're trying to accomplish in this phase 5, developing the water loss profile. Well, doing that allows us to say, well, there are certain tools that work for one, but not another of these three leakage categories. And so we'll take a quick look at an example. If a system, and this is an illustration of a system's profile between these three types of losses. In this case, in the maroon color, the middle category of unreported is making up the bulk of the total leakage that the system is experiencing for the audit year that they're looking at. And so the tools you can see proactive leak detection is going to be likely an effective tool for them to use because they have a lot of the type of leakage that you can find with microphones and ground equipment. You can see some other examples of tools that apply to the different categories. Pressure management, optimizing pressure conditions within the network actually have an effect on the overall flow rate of any type of leakage, no matter what each of these three it is. So that's something that's in the toolbox. Certainly replacing lines is something that can address all three types of leakage. It happens to be the most expensive. That's the capital approach. So we really want to identify how to optimize those less expensive approaches to leakage management, but we need to know which of these three buckets that our leakage is most predominant, and that's what we're looking at. Here's another example, just to help sort of round out the illustration of why we need the profile to select the right tool or tools. And we see in this case a system whose the predominant type of leakage that they are experiencing is background leakage. And this, by the way, is something you might see in a system that is certainly getting on up in age or degradation of the condition of the infrastructure. The more it ages and degrades, then the joints and the elements of those weeps and seeps tend to get more and more and more. Again, those are ones that are not generating enough noise that acoustic leak detection works for. So if your profile looks like this, then acoustic leak detection is actually probably not going to be very effective. And think of the anecdotal stories you've probably heard. I know we have over time, in many cases. Well, we went out and we did some leak detections, but we didn't find anything, or we didn't find much. And what happens is it's usually this, where they've either have predominantly background or maybe predominantly reported leakage where they've already interacted with those, and it's not really something that acoustic leak detection is helpful for. So that's really the purpose of phase 5A, is to get to, for each of our 19 water audits, 19 systems, what does the leakage profile look like? And then on the apparent loss, take a bit more of a dive into what does the apparent loss profile look like for the same reasons, to make sure that we are identifying which tools are going to be most effective for each utility's individual situation, and then help to make sure that the interventions are tailored accordingly. So with that, let's take a quick peek at what type of stuff we're going to be asking you for. And that is a document we've prepared. It's a written data request. So this is available that we'll put in your inboxes here following the webcast today. But I wanted to talk through the elements that are in there and have a chance to maybe do a little Q&A. And I'll go ahead and offer that following the webcast today, we're also going to be reaching out to you one-to-one and just giving you a quick call just to touch base. And the reason for that is some of this data that we're asking you for, it may come from the work order system in one utility. It may come from a stack of manual paper records in another utility. It may not be immediately available in yet another utility. So the source of the data may vary, and we understand that. And so what we want to do is just have a chance to chat with you briefly and provide any maybe initial guidance on where to go to look for it. And if you have any initial questions on how that data looks in your system relative to what we're specifically asking for, and make sure we're syncing up that way. Excel format is always preferred. If all you have are scanned documents, that's okay too. Certainly if you have digital or digitized Excel-based information, it just makes it easier to work with, but we'll work with you wherever you are. We are looking at a couple different years of window here, 2016 and 2017. I'll talk a little bit more about why that is in just a moment after we go through some of the data points. And then our timeline is a couple months out to ask you to provide it back to us. So that's the big picture on the data request. As we dive in to essential data, we've got some stuff that we really do need to get some form or fashion from you in order to develop the water loss profile. There's also some stuff we'll call optional. If you've got it, we would love to have it. If you don't have it, don't sweat it. That's kind of the deal. So line repair data, anytime you make a repair on a break, either a main, service, or appurtenance of any type, Typically, that's the type of thing that does get recorded, and usually in some type of work order system. And again, that may be fancy software, that may be a clipboard where the stack of manual records, whatever the case is. It may be someone's Excel sheet where they're tracking the type of stuff in a single file. Could be a bunch of Excel files on your file server. Whatever format this is in, this is the type of data that we are hoping to get from you. And generally speaking, when a work order gets recorded, most most of these things are things that you are recording already. ID number on the work order itself. What was the break repairing? Was it a main? Was it a service? Was it a valve, a hydrant, or any other appurtenance? If you are recording that type of information, that we would like to see that. The size of the line, material type. The next two bullets deal with time stamping, and usually there's some indication of when the work order was opened. That correlates to when you became aware of a break, and then when it was repaired. What we are really after in when a leak having been repaired, that timestamp, the date and the time. Ideally, when we're after is when the flow of water stopped. We recognize that that's not always something that folks are tracking specifically. So if all you have is when the work order was closed, what's the timestamp for the close of the work order? That's something we can work with. It will serve at least as a proxy for when the physical leak was stopped and the water flow was shut off. So again, if you have more detail than that, fantastic. But if you have something close to that, not exactly, then just let us know. We'll work with you on whatever you have. And then you can see the last few bullets there. So that's on the line repair data. Typically, we would hope to get this maybe in some type of database. But again, if all you have are individual records, then just let us know. We're going to work with you on that. One more item that we would put into the essential data box is a few pieces of data on your system. And these are all fairly high level and hopefully things that are relatively at your fingertips. But a breakdown of your pipe network, we're interested in miles of main by diameter. So ideally an inventory, if you have so many miles of a 12-inch line, so many miles of 8-inch line, 6-inch, etc. Just a simple table summarizing that. Similarly, a rough breakdown of how much different material you have. And this may be less well documented. If it is, that's okay, but even your estimation of this would be helpful. How much of your network is plastic versus ductile iron, cast iron, AC, galvanized, whatever your material breakdown. Just give us an idea of the percentage of those. Service lines are just interested in the predominant material. If you have a breakdown specifically of how many copper versus plastic or other material lines you have, and can put that in a table, that's fantastic. If all you have is just your estimation of, well, we're mostly copper or mostly something else, that at least that would be helpful too. Your best guess on the average age of the pipe network. All the storage tanks in the distribution. Well, actually, let me go back. Your best guess on the average age of the pipe network is sort of at a minimum. That would be very helpful. If you have a table that is a bit more concrete and quantitative on the breakdown of the ages of parts of the pipe network, certainly provide that. So that goes for all this. If you have more detailed data than we're asking for, we would love to see it. But this is sort of at least we hope to get this from you as listed on the screen. On your volume of storage tanks, really what we're needing there is the total. If you want to give it to us in a breakdown on a per tank, that's fine, but ultimately we really just need the total volume that's suspended in your storage tanks altogether. And then lastly, a table that identifies for all your service connections, how many of them are 5/8, how many of them are 1 inch, 1.5 inches, 2 inch, etc. And hopefully that's information that is fairly available. All right, so that takes care of the essential data. So let's take a look at the items that we would call optional. If you have them, we hope to get them, and you may have some of them, but not others. So taking a quick look, for those of you who are conducting any type of customer meter testing, and from our work with you in the prior phase in developing the validated baseline water audit, we already have learned that there are maybe 6, 7, or 8 or so of the 19 that are doing some type of proactive customer meter testing, perhaps just on your large customers, maybe some random sampling, but whatever the case may be, if you are doing that, we would be interested to get a hold of any of the results in whatever format that those results are in. That would help us to do some analysis on the apparent loss profiling. If you do provide it to us, we would ask that you maybe reiterate the nature of the meters that were tested. Were these a combination of high revenue meters that you wanted to check out, plus maybe some customer complaints? Is it strictly customer complaints? Just let us know what meters were tested, or maybe the reason they were tested, and that helps us. And then some specific fields there, you can see identification meter, test date, etc. Typically, that type of stuff is recorded when you do a test. So hopefully those fields are there. If you only have some of those fields, just provide us what you have. You can see tank overflows, theft data, and billing adjustments. And you can follow along with the guidance text there. Generally, is if you are tracking these things in a way that you can go back, they're archived somewhere, you can go back and pull for the 2016 and 2017 period. And maybe you just have the number of events, and that's all, or maybe you have the number of events and an estimate of the volume associated with the event, or any other details with the event, perhaps on theft data. It may be the nature of the theft. Was it a meter tamper? Maybe you shut it off and then the customer shut it back on. That would kind of be a meter tampering, I would argue. Anything that would help to just illustrate the nature of the event. Ultimately, if you're tracking volumes associated with those things as well, we'd be interested in whatever you have. Again, this is all in the optional area, but these are things that, if they are available, they would support doing some more advanced analysis on the apparent loss profile. So that's where this plays in. So with that, I'm going to round out by calling out a special assignment. This is something really it's a function of the timing and sort of when phase 1 through 4 got to a wrap point, which ended up being late last year, so late 2017. If you'll recall, we were working with the 2016 calendar year as the baseline year. That was the baseline audit. Well, obviously now we're a quarter into 2018, so it's actually time to consider doing your 2017 water audit. And what we would encourage and hope that each of you would do is to go ahead and do your 2017 water audit on your own and use the 2016 audit as the template. You can take that file, do a save as, and really use the data that you gathered for the 2016 process working with us to repopulate the numbers basically with 2017 information. And that is going to be helpful. I mean, I think the Catawba Water Group as a whole has recognized that doing the annual audit is something that is a group goal. This is kind of part of the long-term strategy. So this is a good time to go ahead and put together your 2017 audit. What we're asking is, if you can do that and provide it to us, it will enrich the review and the analysis of that water loss profiling for this phase 5. We'll basically have a 2016 period and a 2017 period to be able to do a bit more of a deep analysis, and if there's maybe changes from year to year, that can sometimes provide insight into the water loss profiles. So if you're at a spot where that's not the way you'd prefer to do it, and maybe you can simply provide us with your supply volumes and your consumption volumes and any updates to your other just basic system metrics, we would be happy to assist with filling out the 2017 water audit and helping basically to work collaboratively with you. So that's an offer that's on the table, and either way, we'd love to see everybody get to completion of the 2017 water audit as part of this process, and that'll round out, I think, the data set and also keep everyone moving forward. Because remember this, now you'll have a 2016 baseline, 2017 add to that. A year from now, there'll be time for the 2018 audit. So establishing a validated trend on how your water loss is performing, that's very helpful information as well over time. So that's part of the long goal as well. Just a reminder, anything you can give us, give it to us in Excel if you can. If not, we will take it in a non-digital version, scanned or PDF. The time period for anything that we're asking for is both calendar 2016 and 2017 year. And then the overall deadline that we're aiming for is in May, mid-May. So just a quick graphic on there. Here we are today, mid-March. A couple months out, we're aiming for this data for the phase 5. We'll be using the early summer months to analyze and get to the water loss profile. From there, the general aim is to move to phase 5 and so 5B. And so let's just give a quick look ahead as to once the water loss profiles are established, phase 5B and beyond, we're trying to work our way through the big picture to get to ultimately to interventions that are cost effective. And so 5B is where the economic piece of it really comes in, and the cost benefit relationship between what does it take to chase loss versus what we're reducing and getting back, and revenue recovery. How does all that play out, and therefore what is the optimal target? What targets are we shooting for, and what interventions are going to be effective to get us to those targets? And those, of course, tailored to each of the 19 individual situations, because volumes and costs are going to vary from each of the 19. So that's the big picture, and big thank you in advance for your efforts to gather this data, your efforts to do the special assignments to get the 2017 water audit prepared, or maybe provide us some info so we can collaborate with you to prepare that. And just a sort of a round out reminder, the program website is still in effect. It is catawbawaterloss.org, and we'll provide all this to the members in an email notice following this webcast. But this is the website where resources are available. That'll also be where you can find the written data requests that I've just talked through, as well as any updates, schedule, contact information. It's basically your hub for anything related to this program. With that, I'll ask Drew to let me know. Drew, have we had any written questions come in so far? We'll hit those first, and then I'll ask you to open the mics to see if we had any questions anybody wanted to shout out.
Hey, Will, no written questions during the presentation, so I'm going to open up the phone lines for people to chime in.
All right, sounds good. So our phone lines are now open, and Fred Castles, if you are on, I believe you are, if you're on the audio, maybe I'll just go to you first and just ask if you wanted to amplify or offer any other comments before we sort of open the floor for questions from the group.
Well, I am on the call. I don't know if you mentioned this earlier. I've been kind of in and out. Will Kavanaugh have any conference calls with the member utilities as part of this data collection phase?
It's a great question. The answer is generally no, not like there were the calls on the prior phase. The prior phase, we kind of convened the team around the call and we went through line by line on the audit. It won't be quite like that on this phase, but we will be reaching out by phone to each utility, more of just a check-in and maybe supporting them in their data gathering. But it won't necessarily be get everybody around the table and we're going to take the 2-hour window to sort of go through the process like it was last time. Great question.
Yeah, okay. I don't have anything else to add. You did a great job explaining what's in phase 5A, and included everything that you and I talked about Tuesday afternoon.
Okay.
So,
all right, awesome.
Good on my end.
All right. That sounds great. So we'll try this out sometimes with a big group. It may get a little crazy, but if anybody has a question, just kind of shout out maybe your name and shout out your question. All right, give it just a few more seconds. Make sure folks are coming off mute. All right, sounds like we're at a pretty good spot. Here's what I would propose is
I do have one question.
Okay, great. Who's talking now?
It's Drew Foy, City of Hickory.
All right.
My question is on the system data.
Yeah.
Under the total tank volume, are we looking for total usable storage or what we're actively using?
That's a good question. I would say it's looking for total usable storage.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. All right, we'll give a few more moments for any other questions that may bubble up.
Hey, this is Jared Jordan, Union County.
Hey, Jared.
This PDF will be provided to us as well, right?
That is correct. We'll push it out by email following this webcast, and it'll also live permanently on the program website. You can always access it there.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Good deal. Still open for other questions if there are any.
This is Steve Kavanaugh. This is Steve. Is it possible for you to maybe, for those that may not have familiarity with the Catawba website, just to do a quick navigation and show where that information is? Would that be helpful, or is that something in a follow-on link?
That's actually real easy to do, Steve. I'll do that right now. It's a good suggestion. Just got to close my Facebook and my my morning news here. Here we go. All right. I'm kidding. I'm not on Facebook. All right. So CatawbaWaterLoss.org, and you go here and just click enter, and there's a highly encrypted password. It is the word Catawba, all lowercase. Catawba. And you can see that pops us in. And our landing page always has the, hey, where are things at and what's next? So that's always helpful. You can see today we're on the webcast, March 15th. And then the other is collecting providers.
We can see your email rather than the web browser.
Oh, my goodness.
Uh-huh.
All right. Do I have any urgent emails I need to respond to?
All of them are urgent. Some of them are bad.
All right. That sounds good. All right. Drew, are you seeing the web browser?
I am, Will.
Yeah, I'm seeing the web browser as well.
Okay, good deal. All right. That's what I love about these live webcasts. You never know what will happen. All right. So here you can see what's on the home page, and it's also always on the resources page. You can go for the Phase 5 data request right there. If you click on that, it pulls up, and we've color-coded the essential data, of course, the special assignment to do your 2017 audit, and then the optional data. All right. And of course, back to our home page. Great suggestion, Steve. All right, let's go back to open floor for any other questions on from the group. Excellent. Well, sounds like we're at a pretty good spot this morning, gang. What I'll suggest is this will be recorded, so we'll actually post this recording onto this same website if you need to refer back to any of this conversation. Keep a lookout for a notice email from us. And then, as I mentioned, we're probably going to give you a call maybe in the next week or two, just to touch base on the data gathering process and make sure that you guys are feeling good, and if you have any initial questions, that we're there to provide guidance and support towards our goal of 2 months from now to make sure we've got all the data we need to move ahead. So with that, I'll thank everybody for your time, and we'll clip it a few minutes early this morning. Hope everybody has a great day, and we'll talk with you soon.